The water cascaded down the hillside like a silver river of revenge, and Karen's perfectly manicured lawn was drowning in 3 feet of chlorinated chaos. But as she stood there screaming about property damage and lawsuits, pointing her trembling finger at Mike's innocent face, she had no idea that her own sprinkler system had been running for 6 hours straight, flooding her basement with thousands of gallons while she slept. The real flood wasn't coming from above. It was rising from below, and it was about to destroy everything she'd spent decades building. Mike Henderson stood at the edge of his kidney-shaped pool, watching the last of the crystal-clear water swirl down the drain with a satisfying gurgle. 23 years he'd owned this house, and this was the first time he'd ever had to completely drain the thing. The concrete walls, now exposed and gleaming wet in the afternoon sun, looked foreign and vulnerable, like seeing someone naked for the first time. "Dad, you sure about this?" His daughter Jessica called from the patio, where she was folding pool towels with the mechanical precision of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. At 19, she'd reached that perfect age where everything her father did was either embarrassing or catastrophically wrong. "The pH levels are completely shot, Jess. Pool guy said it'd be cheaper to start fresh than try to balance all those chemicals." Mike wiped his hands on his cargo shorts, already feeling the familiar ache in his lower back that came with any home improvement project. "Besides, your mom always wanted to redo the tile work. Figured this summer was as good a time as any." The mention of Linda sent a brief shadow across his face. 3 years since the divorce, and he still caught himself talking about her in present tense, as if she might walk through the sliding glass door any moment with her reading glasses perched on her nose and a honey-do list in her hand. Jessica caught the look. "She would have hired professionals, Dad." "Yeah, well, she's not here, is she?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Mike cleared his throat and gestured toward the pool. "This is good, honest work. Gets the mind off things." The truth was, Mike needed the distraction. His contracting business had been struggling ever since the Henderson and Associates sign came down and became just Henderson Construction. Losing his business partner in the divorce settlement had been almost as devastating as losing his wife. Almost. He glanced toward the house next door, where Karen Morrison's pristine Tudor-style home sat like a monument to suburban perfection. Every blade of grass in her lawn was exactly 2 inches tall. Every flower in her garden bloomed in perfect symmetrical rows. Even her mailbox looked like it had been detailed with a toothbrush. Karen herself was nowhere to be seen, which was unusual. Normally, any activity in Mike's backyard brought her to her kitchen window faster than a fire alarm. She'd stand there with her arms crossed, watching him with the intensity of a prison guard, ready to pounce on any violation of the Homeowners Association rules. Not that draining a pool violated any HOA regulations. Mike had checked. Twice. The water level had dropped to about 2 feet now, revealing the stark white pool steps and the collection of pool toys that had sunk to the bottom over the winter, a deflated flamingo, several foam noodles, and what looked like the remains of last summer's pool party. Back when there were still pool parties. Back when Linda still laughed at his jokes and didn't wince when he reached for her hand. "I'm going to Sarah's," Jessica announced, shouldering her purse. "You need anything from town? Grab some of those chemicals on that list by the fridge. And maybe some beer. This is thirsty work." She rolled her eyes but nodded. "Try not to flood the neighborhood while I'm gone." Mike chuckled as he watched her walk away, all teenage confidence and barely contained impatience with the adult world. She had Linda's walk, that determined stride that said she knew exactly where she was going, even when she didn't. The pump hummed steadily, doing its job with mechanical indifference. Mike settled into one of the patio chairs and cracked open a Budweiser, letting the afternoon sun warm his face. For the first time in weeks, he felt something approaching peace. That's when he heard the screaming. "Mike! Mike Henderson!" The voice cut through the suburban tranquility like a chainsaw through silk. Mike's eyes snapped open, and he nearly dropped his beer as he saw Karen Morrison charging across her backyard toward the property line, her face flushed red with fury. She was still in her bathrobe, a fluffy pink thing that made her look like an angry flamingo, and her usually perfect blonde hair was sticking up at odd angles. In her right hand, she clutched her cell phone like a weapon. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, stopping just short of the low fence that separated their properties. Mike set down his beer and stood up slowly, the way you might approach a rabid animal. "Just draining the pool, Karen. Everything okay?" Okay. Okay. Her voice cracked on the second word. My basement is flooding. There's water everywhere. Mike's stomach dropped. He looked from Karen's furious face to his pool, where the water level had dropped to maybe 18 inches. The math didn't add up, but the accusation was clear. Karen, I don't see how. Don't you dare. She jabbed her finger at him like she was casting a curse. Don't you dare stand there and pretend this isn't your fault. All that water has to go somewhere, doesn't it? And where does it go? Straight down the hill into MY house. Mike glanced at the gentle slope of their backyards. His property did sit slightly higher than hers, but the grade was minimal. More importantly, pool water went into the municipal drain system, not into the ground. The water goes into the storm drains. Karen. It doesn't. Liar. The word exploded from her lips with such venom that Mike actually took a step back. I've got 3 inches of water in my finished basement, and it's rising. My Persian rugs are ruined. My husband's workshop is destroyed. She held up her phone, and Mike could see she was recording him. The red dot in the corner of the screen felt like a sniper's laser sight. I'm calling my lawyer, she continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And my insurance company. And the city. You're going to pay for every damn penny of damage, Henderson. Every damn penny. Mike felt heat rising in his chest, part anger, part panic. He'd dealt with difficult neighbors before, but Karen Morrison was in a class by herself. In the 5 years since she'd moved in next door, she'd filed complaints about his Christmas lights, too bright, his lawnmower, too loud, his garbage cans, positioned 3 inches over the property line, and his dog, barking, though Mike didn't own a dog. But this was different. This involved money. Potentially a lot of money. Karen, I understand you're upset, but let's think about this logically. The water from my pool goes directly into... Don't you dare talk to me about logic, she screamed, her face now approaching the color of a ripe tomato. I know what I see. I know what's happening in my house. And I know it's your fault. Behind her, Mike caught a glimpse of her husband Harold peeking through their sliding glass door. Harold was a thin, nervous man who worked in accounting and spoke in whispers, as if afraid his own voice might disturb the peace. Right now he looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Harold can tell you, Karen continued, noticing Mike's gaze. Harold, get out here and tell him what happened. Harold opened the door a crack. Karen, maybe we should. Now, Harold. The poor man stepped outside, still in his pajamas despite it being nearly 3 in the afternoon. There's definitely water in the basement, he said quietly, not meeting Mike's eyes. Quite a bit, actually. See. Karen's voice reached a pitch that probably had dogs howling 3 counties over. Even Harold admits it. Mike rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. Harold, did you check your water heater? Your pipes? When did you first notice the water? Well, he doesn't need to check anything. Karen interrupted. We know where it's coming from. It's coming from you and your irresponsible, selfish decision to dump thousands of gallons of water without considering your neighbors. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Mike looked at his pool, now down to about a foot of water, then back at Karen's rage-twisted face. Something cold settled in his stomach. Karen, I followed all the proper procedures. I checked with the city. I don't care what procedures you think you followed. I care about my house. I care about my belongings. I care about the fact that you've probably caused tens of thousands of dollars in damage. She was pacing now, her pink bathrobe fluttering behind her like a superhero cape designed by someone with questionable taste. The cell phone remained, pointed at Mike, recording every word. I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth, she continued, her voice dropping to a poisonous hiss. Your house, your business, your truck, all of it. When I'm done with you, you'll be living in a cardboard box under the interstate. The threat hit Mike like a physical blow. He thought about his struggling business, his mounting legal bills from the divorce, Jessica's college tuition. The idea of losing everything over something that wasn't even his fault made his vision blur with fury. Now wait just a damn minute. No. Karen pointed her finger at him again, and Mike had the irrational urge to bite it. You wait. You and your selfish, Thoughtless, she stopped mid-sentence. The insurance office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Mike sat in a plastic chair that had seen better decades, watching Karen pace the small waiting room like a caged animal. She'd changed out of her bathrobe into a Navy business suit that probably cost more than Mike's monthly truck payment, but no amount of professional attire could hide the panic in her eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, please have a seat," the receptionist said for the third time. "Mr. Patterson will be with you shortly." Karen ignored her, continuing her nervous circuit around the room. Her heels clicked against the linoleum with metronomic precision. Click, 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 like a countdown timer on a bomb. Mike pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos Jessica had sent him from the street. Fire trucks, police cars, and a massive geyser of water shooting 15 feet into the air right in front of Karen's house. The caption read, "Dad, this is insane. Channel 7 News is here. Channel 7. Great." Mike's day just kept getting better. "Mr. Henderson? Mrs. Morrison?" A tall man in an expensive suit appeared in the doorway. Richard Patterson, senior claims investigator, according to the nameplate on his door. He had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes and the handshake of a man who'd spent decades dealing with people at their worst moments. "Please, come in. Both of you." Patterson's office was a shrine to corporate efficiency. Diplomas on the walls, family photos positioned at precise angles, and a desk so clean it could have been used for surgery. He gestured for them to sit in matching chairs facing his desk, then settled into his own chair with the practiced ease of a judge taking the bench. "Now then," he said, opening a thick file folder. "We have quite a situation here, don't we?" Karen leaned forward, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Mr. Patterson, I need to explain something. When I filed this claim, I thought, Mrs. Morrison." Patterson's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Before we begin, I need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded, and anything you say may be used in both our internal investigation and any potential legal proceedings." The word legal hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Karen's face went pale, and Mike felt a strange mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. Part of him, the part that remembered her threats about taking everything he owned, wanted to watch her squirm. But another part, the part that remembered Harold's frightened face and 23 years of suburban civility, just felt tired. "Mr. Patterson," Mike said, "before we go any further, you should know that the city has confirmed the flooding was caused by a water main break, not by my pool drainage." Patterson nodded without looking up from his file. "Yes, I have the preliminary report from the water department right here. A 6-inch main ruptured at approximately 8:47 a.m. yesterday morning, causing extensive flooding in the Morrison basement." He looked up at Karen. "The same basement you claimed was flooded by Mr. Henderson's negligent disposal of pool water." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I made a mistake. I was upset, and I jumped to conclusions, and, Mrs. Morrison." Patterson's voice remained maddeningly calm. "You didn't just jump to conclusions. You filed a sworn statement claiming that Mr. Henderson deliberately and negligently caused damage to your property. You provided detailed testimony about witnessing him drain his pool directly onto your land. You submitted photographic evidence that you claimed showed water flowing from his property to yours." He pulled out a stack of photos from the file. Mike recognized them immediately, shots of Karen's flooded basement, but also pictures of his pool and backyard taken from deceptive angles that made it look like water was flowing downhill toward her house. These photos were taken at 7:30 a.m. yesterday morning, according to the timestamps, Patterson continued. "Nearly an hour before the water main actually broke, which means either you have supernatural powers of prophecy, or—" He let the sentence hang unfinished, but the implication was clear as crystal. Karen's carefully composed facade cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was angry, and I wanted to teach him a lesson, but then the water main actually did break, and I thought." "You thought what, exactly?" Patterson's tone remained professionally neutral, but Mike could hear the steel underneath. "That you could use a real disaster to cover up a fraudulent claim." "It wasn't fraud." Karen's voice cracked on the word. "I really believed he was responsible. Mrs. Morrison, you filed photographic evidence of damage that occurred an hour before the event you claimed caused it. That's not a mistake. That's premeditation." Mike watched Karen crumble in real time. Her shoulders sagged, Her perfectly styled hair began to wilt, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely small. It should have felt like victory, but instead it just felt hollow. What happens now? Mike asked. Patterson closed the file with a soft thud that sounded like a gavel. Well, Mr. Henderson, the good news is that you're completely clear of any liability. We'll be closing this claim with no fault assigned to you, and your premiums won't be affected. Mike exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. And the bad news? The bad news is for Mrs. Morrison. Patterson turned his attention back to Karen, who was staring at her hands like they might hold the answers to all of life's problems. Filing a fraudulent insurance claim is a third-degree felony in this state. The penalty can include up to 5 years in prison and up to $100,000 in fines. Karen made a sound like a wounded animal. Prison. But I have a family. I have a job. I can't go to prison for a mistake. It stopped being a mistake the moment you fabricated evidence, Patterson said. Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask, have you done this before? What? No. Never. Patterson nodded and made a note in the file. We'll be conducting a full audit of your claim history, of course, and we'll be reporting this to the State Insurance Fraud Bureau within 24 hours, as required by law. Karen stood up so abruptly her chair tipped backward. Wait. Please. There has to be something we can work out. I'll withdraw the claim. I'll pay for Mr. Henderson's legal fees. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Mrs. Morrison, the moment you filed this claim, it became a matter of public record. I can't ring that bell, even if I wanted to. Patterson's tone softened just slightly. My advice would be to contact a criminal defense attorney immediately. Karen turned to Mike with desperation written across her face. Mike, please. You know I'm not a criminal. You know I made a mistake. Can't you talk to them? Can't you tell them you don't want to press charges? Mike looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time in 5 years. Underneath the designer clothes and the perfect makeup, she was just a scared woman who'd let her anger and pride drive her into a corner she couldn't escape from. Karen, this isn't up to me anymore. You threatened to sue me for everything I own. You tried to destroy my life over something that wasn't even my fault. And when the truth came out, instead of apologizing, you doubled down and tried to use a real disaster to cover your tracks. I know I screwed up, but nothing. Mike stood up, suddenly feeling very tired. You made your choices, Karen. Now you get to live with the consequences. Patterson cleared his throat. Mr. Henderson, there is one other matter we need to discuss. Mike's stomach dropped. What now? Mrs. Morrison's homeowner's insurance policy includes a clause about fraudulent claims. Not only will they not pay for the water damage to her basement, but they're also dropping her coverage immediately, given that she still owes money on her mortgage. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Without homeowner's insurance, the bank would likely call in the loan. Karen could lose her house. Karen sank back into her chair, the full weight of the situation finally hitting her. Harold, she whispered. Oh God, Harold doesn't know any of this. He thinks it was just a mistake with the paperwork. Mrs. Morrison, Patterson said gently, you need to tell your husband what's happening. And you need to call that attorney. Today. As they left the insurance office, Mike found himself walking beside Karen toward the parking lot. She moved like a woman in a trance, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt with none of their earlier authority. Mike, she said quietly, as they reached their cars, I know you have every right to hate me. I know I brought this on myself. But Harold, he's innocent in all this. He's a good man who doesn't deserve to lose everything because his wife is an idiot. Mike stopped with his hand on his truck door. In the distance, he could hear sirens, probably more emergency vehicles dealing with the ongoing water main crisis in their neighborhood. What do you want me to say, Karen? I don't know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe that you'll remember we were neighbors once. That we used to wave to each other in the mornings. That before all this craziness, we were just two people trying to live our lives. Mike looked at her, and for a moment he saw past the designer clothes and the perfect lawn and the years of petty complaints. He saw a woman who'd made a catastrophic mistake and was about to lose everything because of it. Karen, His phone rang. The caller ID made him pause. Channel 7 News. Mr. Henderson? This is Maria Santos from Channel 7. We are doing a story about insurance fraud in suburban neighborhoods, and we understand you were the victim of a false claim fill. The first thing Mike noticed when he turned onto Maple Street was the circus. 3 news vans lined the curb like vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metallic prayers. Reporters with perfect hair and expensive suits stood in front of his house, gesturing dramatically while cameras rolled. One of them was actually standing in his driveway. Mike parked across the street and called Jessica. "Where are you?" "Inside with all the curtains closed," she said. "Dad, this is insane. They keep ringing the doorbell and shouting questions through the windows." One woman tried to climb over the back fence. "Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone. I'll be there in a minute." Mike took a deep breath and stepped out of his truck. Instantly, the reporters descended on him like a pack of hungry wolves. "Mr. Henderson, Channel 7 News. Can you tell us about the fraudulent insurance claim?" "Mr. Henderson, is it true your neighbor tried to frame you for flood damage?" "How does it feel to be vindicated, Mr. Henderson?" Mike pushed through the crowd without saying a word, fishing his keys from his pocket as microphones thrust toward his face like accusing fingers. Someone grabbed his arm, and he jerked away with more force than necessary, sending a young reporter stumbling backward. "Please, Mr. Henderson, just one statement." He made it to his front door and slammed it behind him, leaning against it as if the reporters might try to break it down. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, her face pale with stress. "Dad, what the hell is going on? The neighbors are all outside watching, and Mrs. Patterson from across the street asked me if we were criminals." Mike pulled his daughter into a hug, feeling her trembling against his chest. "We are not criminals, Jess. Karen made a very bad mistake, and now everyone wants to make it into entertainment." "Karen Morrison? The woman who complained about our Christmas lights?" "The same one." Mike moved to the living room window and peered through a gap in the curtains. The reporters were still there, but now they'd been joined by neighbors, people Mike had known for years, standing on their lawns and porches like spectators at a gladiator match. He saw Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down, whispering to her husband, while pointing at the Morrison house. The Pattersons were standing at the end of their driveway with their arms crossed, shaking their heads in obvious disapproval. Even old Mr. Garcia, who usually minded his own business, was standing in his garden with his arms folded, watching the drama unfold. "They're not just here for us," Mike realized. "They're here for Karen too." Jessica joined him at the window. "Look." Across the street, Harold Morrison's Honda Civic was pulling into the driveway. Harold stepped out of the car in his rumpled accountant suit, lunchbox in hand, completely oblivious to the media circus surrounding his home. He looked around in bewilderment as reporters rushed toward him, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in his direction. "Mr. Morrison, what's your response to your wife's insurance fraud charges?" "Sir, did you know about the false claim? How long has your wife been planning this scheme?" Mike watched Harold's face cycle through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as the questions registered. The man's lunchbox fell from his hands, scattering its contents, a sandwich, an apple, a thermos, across the driveway like the pieces of his suddenly shattered life. I don't. What insurance fraud?" Harold's voice was barely audible, but the microphones picked it up. "What are you talking about?" Karen appeared in their doorway, still in her business suit from the insurance meeting. Even from across the street, Mike could see the panic on her face as she realized what was happening. She'd managed to avoid the reporters on her way home, but now they had Harold. "Harold," she called out, "don't say anything. Come inside." But Harold was frozen on his driveway, surrounded by reporters and cameras, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Karen, what's going on? Why are there news crews here?" "Mr. Morrison, are you complicit in your wife's insurance fraud? Did you help fabricate evidence against your neighbor? How does it feel to be married to a felon?" The word felon hit Harold like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his face going white. "Felon. Karen, what did you do?" Karen rushed toward him, but the reporters blocked her path, sensing blood in the water. "Harold, please, just come inside." I can explain everything. Explain what? Harold's voice was rising now, cracking with panic. Karen, what did you do? Mike felt sick watching it. Whatever Karen had done to him, Harold didn't deserve this. Public humiliation. The man was an innocent bystander whose entire life was being destroyed on live television. We have to do something, Jessica said quietly. Like what? It's not our fight anymore. Dad, look at him. He's about to collapse. She was right. Harold was swaying on his feet, his face grey with shock. The reporters were circling him like sharks, shouting questions that grew more aggressive with each passing second. Is your marriage a sham, Mr. Morrison? Did you know your wife was a criminal when you married her? Are you planning to divorce her? That last question seemed to break something inside Harold. He looked up at the reporter who'd asked it, a young woman with predatory eyes and a hungry smile, and for a moment his face twisted with pure rage. My wife is not a criminal, he shouted, his voice carrying across the neighborhood. She made a mistake. She's a good person who made one terrible mistake. The reporters pressed closer, sensing they'd struck gold. What kind of mistake, Mr. Morrison? Tell us about the insurance claim. Did she confess to you? Harold looked around at the crowd of neighbors, reporters, and cameras, and Mike could see the exact moment when the man realized his life as he knew it was over. His shoulders sagged, his face crumpled, and he began to cry, not the dignified tears of grief, but the ugly, choking sobs of complete humiliation. I can't. He gasped. I can't breathe. Harold clutched at his chest and dropped to his knees on the driveway. Several neighbors started forward, but the reporters held their ground, cameras still rolling, capturing every moment of his breakdown. Dad, Jessica whispered. He's having a panic attack. Mike didn't think. He threw open his front door and charged across the street, pushing through the crowd of reporters like a linebacker. Back off. Give him some room. He knelt beside Harold, who was hyperventilating and clutching his chest. Harold, look at me. You're okay. You're having a panic attack. You need to slow your breathing. I can't. I can't. Yes, you can. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like this. Mike demonstrated, holding Harold's shoulders steady. That's it. Slow and steady. Karen had finally made it through the reporter gauntlet and dropped to her knees beside her husband. Harold, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Morrison. A reporter thrust a microphone between Mike and Harold. Can you confirm you filed a fraudulent insurance claim? Mike looked up at the reporter with murder in his eyes. Get that camera out of his face before I shove it somewhere uncomfortable. Sir, we have a right to. You have a right to stay on public property and ask questions. You don't have a right to film a man having a medical emergency in his own driveway. Mike stood up, putting himself between the cameras and Harold. Back up. Now. The reporters grudgingly stepped back a few feet, but the cameras kept rolling. Mike looked around at his neighbors, all of them still standing there watching like it was a Netflix series instead of real people's lives falling apart. Really? He called out. This is entertainment to you people? These are your neighbors. Mrs. Patterson had the grace to look ashamed and went back inside her house. A few others followed suit, but most remained, their curiosity stronger than their decency. Harold's breathing was starting to normalize, but his face was still grey. With shock. Karen, he whispered. Please tell me they're wrong. Please tell me you didn't do what they're saying. Karen's face crumpled. Harold, I can explain. Did you file a false insurance claim against Mike? The question hung in the air like a sword over their marriage. Karen looked at her husband, then at Mike, then at the cameras that were still recording every word. Yes, she whispered. But I thought, did you lie to the insurance company? Harold, please, did you lie? The word echoed across the neighborhood, silencing even the reporters for a moment. Harold Morrison, the quiet accountant who never raised his voice, who apologized when other people bumped into him, had just screamed at his wife in front of half the town. Karen closed her eyes. Yes, I lied. Harold stared at her for a long moment, and Mike could see 27 years of marriage dying in real time. You lied to them. You lied to me. You tried to. Destroy an innocent man's life because you were angry. I was trying to protect us. I thought Mike was responsible, and I was scared about the damage costs, and don't. Harold held up his hand. Just don't. I can't listen to any more lies. He struggled to his feet, ignoring Karen's attempt to help him. I need to go. Inside. I need to think. Harold walked toward his house like a man in a trance, leaving Karen kneeling on the driveway surrounded by reporters and cameras. She looked up at Mike with desperation in her eyes. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She said quietly. To see me lose everything. Mike looked down at her. This woman who'd threatened him, lied about him, tried to destroy his life, and felt nothing but pity. No, Karen. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what anyone should w. 3 days later, Mike was replacing the broken fitting in his pool when Detective Ray Martinez showed up at his door. Jessica led him into the backyard, where Mike was elbow-deep in PVC pipe and growing frustration. Mr. Henderson? I'm Detective Martinez with the Fraud Division. I was hoping we could talk. Mike wiped his hands on a rag and straightened up, his back protesting the movement. Martinez was a compact man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of patient eyes that had seen everything twice. He wore a rumpled suit that looked like it had been slept in, and he carried a worn leather folder that probably contained Mike's immediate future. This about Karen Morrison. It is. Mind if we sit down? This might take a while. They settled into the patio chairs where this whole mess had started. Mike could see the Morrison house from here, dark and quiet except for Harold's car in the driveway. Karen's BMW had been gone for 2 days now. Mr. Henderson, I need to ask you some questions about the insurance claim Mrs. Morrison filed against you. I know you've already talked to the insurance company, but we are conducting a criminal investigation now. Mike nodded. Ask away. Walk me through what happened that morning. Start from when you began draining the pool. Mike told the story again. The pool maintenance, the water main break, Karen's accusations, the discovery of the real cause. Martinez took notes in a small notebook, occasionally asking for clarification but mostly just listening. And you never had any prior disputes with Mrs. Morrison that might have motivated her to file a false claim. Mike almost laughed. Detective, Karen Morrison filed complaints against me for everything from my Christmas lights being too bright to my garbage cans being positioned wrong. We've been neighbors for 5 years, and I don't think we've had a single conversation that didn't end with her threatening to call someone, the HOA, the city, a lawyer. So there was bad blood between you. There was Karen being Karen. She's not a bad person, detective. She's just. Mike searched for the right word. Controlling. She likes everything in its proper place, and she doesn't handle it well when life gets messy. Martinez made another note. The insurance investigator says she provided photographic evidence taken before the water main actually broke. Do you know anything about that? She told me she took pictures of her basement flooding and my pool area early that morning, before she knew what had really caused it. I think she was planning to file a complaint against me anyway, and when the Real flood happened, she saw an opportunity to make it stick. That suggests premeditation, Mr. Henderson. This wasn't just a heat-of-the-moment mistake. Mike felt a chill despite the afternoon heat. What are you saying? I'm saying the district attorney is considering filing felony fraud charges. With the photographic evidence taken before the actual incident, they think they can prove she planned this from the beginning. And what does that mean for Karen? Martinez closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. Best case scenario. Probation, community service, restitution to the insurance company. Worst case? 2 to 5 years in state prison. The words hit Mike like a physical blow. He thought about Harold's text message, about Karen crying in the insurance office, about a marriage that had lasted 27 years potentially ending because of one morning's terrible choices. Detective, what if I don't want to press charges? This isn't really up to you anymore, Mr. Henderson. Insurance fraud is a crime against the state, not just against you personally. Once the insurance company reported it, the wheels started turning. But my testimony would be important, right? If I testified that I didn't want her prosecuted, that would carry weight. Martinez studied Mike's face carefully. Mr. Henderson, This woman tried to destroy your life. She could have cost you your business, your home, your reputation. Why would you want to protect her? Mike looked across the yard at the Morrison house, where a small figure appeared briefly in an upstairs window. Harold, probably watching to see if the detective's visit meant more trouble coming his way. Because I've been where she is, detective. 3 years ago, when my wife left me, I was angry and hurt and looking for someone to blame. I made some bad choices too. I was just lucky enough that mine didn't involve the legal system. This is more than bad choices, Mr. Henderson. This is a serious crime. I know, but Karen Morrison isn't a criminal. She's a woman who let her anger and pride drive her into doing something stupid. And now her husband, a good man who never hurt anyone, is paying the price along with her. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, studying Mike with those patient cop eyes. You know, in 23 years on the force, I've seen a lot of victims. Most of them want blood. They want justice. They want revenge. They want to see the person who hurt them pay the maximum price. And you're not most victims. Martinez stood up and tucked his notebook away. I'll make sure the DA knows about your position, Mr. Henderson. I can't promise it'll change anything, but it'll be part of the record. After Martinez left, Mike sat in his backyard watching the shadows lengthen across his half-empty pool. The water was clear now, free of the chlorine and chemicals that had made it unhealthy. In a few days, he'd be able to refill it and start fresh. His phone rang. Harold Morrison. Mike, can you come over? Karen wants to talk to you. Harold. I don't think that's a good idea. The detective just left here, and, please, she's not doing well. And I think you're the only person who might be able to help. 20 minutes later, Mike found himself sitting in the Morrisons' living room for the first time in 5 years. The house was exactly what he'd expected, every surface gleaming, every object in its designated place, every throw pillow perfectly fluffed. It looked like a furniture store showroom, beautiful and cold and completely devoid of personality. Karen sat on the pristine white sofa like a broken doll, still in the same clothes she'd worn to the insurance office 3 days ago. Her perfect hair was unwashed and stringy, her makeup had been cried off and never reapplied, and she looked like she'd aged 10 years in 72 hours. Harold brought coffee on a silver tray, his hand shaking slightly as he set it down. Karen has something she wants to say to you. Karen looked up at Mike with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I know you are, Karen. No, you don't understand. I've been sitting here for 3 days thinking about it, and I realize I've been angry at you for 5 years for absolutely no reason. You never did anything to me. You were just living your life, and I made you the target of all my frustration and fear. She wiped her nose with a tissue that had clearly seen heavy use. When Linda left you, I watched you fall apart. I watched you stop taking care of your yard, stop caring about the little things that used to matter. And instead of feeling sympathy for you, I felt angry. Because if your perfect marriage could fall apart, what did that say about mine? Mike felt something shift in his understanding of their relationship. Karen, I was terrified that Harold would leave me too. So I needed to believe that you were the problem, that you had done something wrong, that you deserved what happened to you. Because if it was just random, if good people could lose everything for no reason, then I wasn't safe either. Harold sat down beside his wife and took her hand. Karen's been seeing a therapist, he said quietly. We both have. Trying to figure out how we got here. And what I figured out, Karen continued, is that I've spent 5 years trying to control everything around me because I couldn't control the things that really scared me. I couldn't control whether Harold would stop loving me, or whether we'd have enough money for retirement, or whether the world would stay the same safe place I thought it was. She looked directly at Mike for the first time since he'd arrived. So I controlled what I could. Your Christmas lights, your garbage cans, your lawn maintenance schedule. It made me feel powerful when everything else felt chaotic. Karen, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because tomorrow I have to go to court and face the consequences of what I did. And Harold. Her voice broke. Harold might not be here when I get back. Harold squeezed her hand tighter. I'm not going anywhere, Karen. We are going to get through this. How can you say that? I humiliated you on television. I turned you into a laughingstock. I might go to prison. Because, Harold said simply, you're my wife. And 27 years of marriage doesn't get erased by one terrible mistake. Mike watched this exchange feeling like an intruder on something intensely private. These two people were rebuilding their relationship in real time, brick by brick, right in front of him. Mike, Karen said, Harold told me what you did for him the other day. How you protected him from the reporters, helped him when he was having the panic attack. After everything I did to you, you still help him. Harold's a good man. He didn't deserve what was happening to him. Neither did you. But I tried to destroy you anyway. Karen took a shaky breath. The detective said you told them you didn't want me prosecuted. Why would you do that? Mike thought about the question seriously. Why was he trying to protect a woman who'd threatened to take everything he owned? Why did he care what happened to Karen Morrison? Mike's driveway was a sea of flashing red and blue lights. 3 police cruisers, Detective Martinez's unmarked sedan, and what looked like a crime scene van were parked at angles that suggested urgency rather than routine. Jessica stood on the front porch in her pajamas despite it being 4 in the afternoon, her face pale with worry. Dad, thank God. Detective Martinez has been waiting for you. He won't tell me what's going on, but he keeps asking about when you drained the pool. Martinez emerged from Mike's backyard, his expression grim. Mr. Henderson, we need to talk. Now. What's this about, detective? I thought we covered everything earlier. We did. But then we got a call from the city engineer's office. They've been investigating the water main break, trying to figure out what caused the cascade failure. Martinez pulled out his notebook, but Mike noticed his hands weren't entirely steady. Turns out it wasn't caused by construction 2 blocks over. Mike felt the blood drain from his face. What do you mean? The break originated directly under your property, Mr. Henderson, right under your pool. And according to the city's timeline, it started at approximately the same time you began draining your pool. The words hit Mike like a sledgehammer to the chest. That's impossible. The city said. The city made a mistake in their initial assessment. They followed the water flow and assumed it started upstream, but when they did the pressure analysis and looked at the pipe damage patterns. Martinez shook his head. Mr. Henderson, I need to ask you directly, what exactly did you do when you drained that pool? Mike's mind raced back to that morning, trying to remember every detail. I opened the drain valve at the bottom of the deep end. That's it. It's the same process I've done every year for maintenance. Did you notice anything unusual? Any resistance when you opened the valve? Any strange sounds? No, Mike stopped. There had been something. Wait. When I first opened the valve, nothing happened for maybe 30 seconds. Then there was this loud crack, like a gunshot, and the water started flowing. Martinez made a note. A crack. Like something breaking. I thought it was just air pressure releasing from the pipes. It's an old system. Mr. Henderson, the city engineer thinks that crack was the sound of the main water line rupturing. The pressure from opening your drain valve created a backflow situation that caused a catastrophic failure in a pipe that was already weakened by age. Mike stared at the detective, the implications slowly sinking in. Are you saying that I actually did cause the flood? That Karen was right? Not intentionally. But yes, it appears your pool drainage was the precipitating event that caused 36,000 gallons of city water to flood the Morrison basement. The irony was so complete, so perfectly devastating, that Mike almost laughed. After all, of Karen's lies, after all the false accusations and fraudulent claims, it turned out she'd been right about the basic fact that mattered most. So what does this mean? For the criminal case, for Karen. Martinez closed his notebook. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Mrs. Morrison filed a false claim claiming you deliberately flooded her property. But it turns out you actually did flood her property, just not deliberately. She's still guilty of fraud though, right? She lied about the evidence she took. Those photos before the flood happened. Yes, she's still guilty of filing a false claim. But now her lawyer is going to argue that the underlying premise of her claim, that you caused the damage, was actually true. That might be enough to get the charges reduced or dismissed entirely. Mike felt like he was falling through space. Everything he thought he knew about the situation had just been turned upside down. And what about my liability? If I actually caused the damage? That's between you, your insurance company, and the Morrisons. The criminal case is about fraud, not about who's financially responsible for the damage. Detective Martinez left 20 minutes later, promising to keep Mike informed as the investigation continued. Mike sat on his front porch, staring at his pool where the truth had been hiding in plain sight for 4 days. Jessica sat down beside him. "Dad, you okay?" "I don't know, kiddo. I honestly don't know." His phone buzzed. Harold Morrison. Mike stared at the caller ID for a long moment before answering. "Mike, we saw the police cars. Is everything okay?" Mike closed his eyes. "Harold, I need to tell you something. And you're not going to like it." 10 minutes later, Harold and Karen were sitting on Mike's porch, listening to him explain what the city engineer had discovered. Karen's face went through a dozen different emotions as the story unfolded: confusion, disbelief, vindication, and finally something that looked like cosmic despair. "So I was right," she said when he finished. "I was actually right about you causing the flood." "Yes, but I was still wrong about everything else. I still lied. I still filed false evidence. I still tried to frame you for something malicious when it was actually just an accident." Harold was shaking his head slowly. "This is unbelievable. After everything we've been through, after all the soul-searching and therapy and rebuilding trust, it turns out the basic premise was correct all along." "Harold," Mike said carefully, "this doesn't change what Karen did. She still committed fraud. She still tried to destroy my reputation based on lies." "But you did cause the damage," Karen said flatly. 36,000 gallons of water. $60,000 in damage and investigation costs. You ruined my basement and then sat there acting like the innocent victim while I got crucified for telling the truth. Mike felt his temper flare. "Karen, you didn't tell the truth. You made up evidence. You took photos before the flood happened and claimed they showed damage from my pool. You lied to everyone about what you witnessed. But I was right about the fundamental fact. Being right by accident doesn't excuse fraud." Harold held up his hands. "Stop. Both of you, just stop." He looked exhausted, like a man who'd been fighting a war for months instead of days. "This doesn't solve anything. If anything, it makes everything more complicated." They sat in silence for a moment, 3 people whose lives had been turned upside down by a combination of mechanical failure and human frailty. "What happens now?" Karen asked quietly. Mike's phone rang before he could answer. His insurance company again. "Mr. Henderson? This is Janet from Mutual Assurance. We've received some new information from the city about the cause of the water main break. We need to schedule another meeting as soon as possible." Mike closed his eyes. "Let me guess. I'm liable for the damage after all." "Mr. Henderson, I can't discuss the details over the phone, but yes, this does significantly change your liability status. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" After he hung up, the 3 of them sat in the growing twilight, watching the streetlights come on across their neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, Mike could hear the sound of children playing, the normal sounds of suburban life continuing despite the drama that had consumed their small corner of the world. "Mike," Karen said finally, "what if we just called it even?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you accidentally caused $60,000 in damage to my house. I accidentally caused $60,000 in legal and investigation costs that you might have to pay. What if we just forgave each other's debts?" Harold looked at his wife with something approaching admiration. "Karen, that's completely crazy," Mike finished. "And probably not legally possible. And it doesn't address the criminal charges you're still facing." "But it would be justice, wouldn't it?" Karen pressed. "Real justice, not the legal kind. You accidentally hurt me. I accidentally hurt you back. We both pay a price, we both learn a lesson, and we both move on." Mike looked at this woman who'd been his enemy for 4 days and his accidental victim for 23 years. The symmetry. of their situation was almost poetic. Two people who'd hurt each other through a combination of mechanical failure and moral failure, each paying the price for the other's pain. Karen, even if I wanted to do that, I can't make the criminal charges disappear. You still have to face the legal consequences for what you did. I know. But maybe if you were willing to tell the court that you don't want me prosecuted, that you consider the matter settled between neighbors. She shrugged. Maybe the judge would be willing to consider alternatives to prison. Harold nodded slowly. Community service. Restitution to the insurance company. Probation. There are options besides prison time, especially for first-time offenders. Mike found himself considering it. The woman who tried to destroy him was asking for mercy, and he was in a position to give it. But more than that, she was offering something that felt like real resolution, not the zero-sum game of winners and losers that the legal system demanded, but a recognition that they'd both contributed to this mess and they could both take responsibility for cleaning it up. You know what the crazy part is? Mike said, if you just knocked on my door that first morning and said, Mike, my basement is flooding and I think it might be related to your pool drainage, I would have helped you figure it out. We would have called the city together, filed the insurance, claims together, maybe even shared the costs. Instead of which, I declared war on you based on assumptions and anger and 5 years of accumulated resentment, Karen said. And here we are. Here we are, Mike agreed. His phone rang again.